Imagine time were a building. Each event is just one room in an endless line of rooms that we walk through. What would that building look like? What would stop it from collapsing? Now imagine you were walking through that building, but you could look at the blueprints. You could see what comes next, and what comes after that, and so on ad infinitum. Time Lords are one of the most intelligent and powerful forces in the universe, mainly due to one thing. Because of their exposure to the time stream, they can see all of time at once. They close their eyes and see the entirety of the timeline. What does that look like? Today, we're going to do a deep dive into Doctor Who lore to find out what the timeline is actually made of. Welcome to Singularity. Before we really get into the fun stuff, we have to define a few terms. You see, science fiction in general, and Doctor Who most definitely, have a bad habit of throwing the word time in front of normal words to make them sci-fi words. For this reason, there can be a lot of term confusion when talking about timelines in Doctor Who. After reading through about 50 different Wikipedia entries, Doctor Who episode scripts, Reddit threads, and anything else I could find, here's what it all means. Timeline, time stream, and time track all refer to the same thing. They're synonymous terms that mean a series of events in sequence. Every person, planet, country, and object has its own personal timeline because every person, planet, country, and object has sequential events. That is, events that occur one after another in a specific order related to it. However, apart from all of these different, unique but intersecting timelines, there's the timeline of the universe. Every important event mapped out, and this is what we're talking about today. When I say the anatomy of the timeline, I mean the different kinds of events that make up the single universal timeline. The second term we need to define is a causal nexus, also known as a nexus point, time-space nexus, or just nexus. A causal nexus is a point where small changes have big outcomes. You see, in the universe of Doctor Who, the butterfly effect usually isn't a thing. Paradoxes, anachronisms, and changes to the past by and large work themselves out. Causal nexuses are events where the butterfly effect does apply. In the words of the Third Doctor, they're events where multiple strands of causality were exposed and weak, and the smallest alteration could produce aberrant loops of existence. Every instance I could find of one of these terms being used fits this definition, with one exception. In The End of Time, the 10th Doctor said he couldn't just go back and stop someone from doing something because he has to stay relative to the master within the causal nexus. I'll admit, I have absolutely no idea what to make of this, but I'll give him a pass because he was under a lot of stress at the time. The final term is time vortex. The time vortex is what allows any type of time travel, and it's pretty consistently described as being either above time or outside of time. Either way, I think it's shown to be a higher dimension that time machines can dip into for time travel. I say I think because Doctor Who has had about 900 different writers, each one of them with different ideas of how all of this should work. Nonetheless, the time vortex is where all time travel occurs, and it's where time corridors and time winds originate from. I told you, this show just puts time in front of random words to make them sound sci-fi. So, with the definitions out of the way, we can get down to the nitty-gritty. There are 3 different types of events that make up the timeline: fixed points, gray areas, and flux points. We'll start with fixed points since they're the easiest. If you imagine the timeline as a building, fixed points are the support beams. They're events that are so important and influential to the flow of time that any alteration would devastate the timeline and cause a temporal collapse. The Daleks are a race of hateful, spiteful, horrible beings who are incapable of feeling any form of empathy. They kill any living being without hesitation or question, and have even tried to destroy entire planets and galaxies before. And even they refuse to meddle with fixed points in time. A few notable fixed points are the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, the artwork from the Renaissance, the death of everyone on Bowie Base 1, the first human colonization of Mars, World War II is strongly implied to be one, and the death of the Doctor. Oh yeah, I should mention that while everyone's future is malleable and open to change, if you read about a significant event in your future, say your death, it becomes a fixed point. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you know it's going to happen, it has to happen. But why are fixed points like that? Well, for some reason, every fixed point has to occur for time to flow properly. Remember when I said they were like support beams? They support the entire timeline. And it should be noted that Time Lords, the race that the Doctor belongs to, can sense when they're in a fixed point. They are that important. The opposite of fixed points are gray areas. Now, some people argue that gray areas and flux points are the same thing, but if you pay attention to how gray areas are described, they are very different. The only episode that ever talked about gray areas specifically is Series 8, Episode 6, Kill the Moon. The gray area in question is whether or not humanity chooses to kill whatever's hatching out of the moon. Oh yeah, the moon is an egg, by the way. Just roll with it. They choose not to destroy it, and it lays an equally large egg, and everything goes on as normal. The reason this is different from flux points, which is where most of the Doctor's adventures take place, is that the 12th Doctor refused to get involved. In fact, one of the major conflicts of the episode Kill the Moon is the fact that the Doctor refuses to help despite his companion, Clara, begging for him to help. But if flux points and gray areas are the same, why would it be such a big deal? Because gray areas are different. Listen to how the Doctor describes them. He calls them tiny eye blinks in the timeline, little moments in which big things are decided. He even outright says they look different than normal moments. Does any of this sound familiar? It should. They're causal nexuses. Moment where small changes can have massive repercussions. Moments where one decision can affect the future of the timeline, and moments that the 12th Doctor has evidently decided he's not going to interfere with. Causal nexuses are sort of the opposite of fixed points. While fixed points have to happen exactly like they do for the timeline to continue running, tiny alterations to causal nexuses cause massive changes to the timeline. They can't change fixed points, obviously, but they have a massive effect on what's left. So what is left? Well, we've covered fixed points and gray areas, so that only leaves one type of event left: flux points. Flux points are far and away the most common type of event in the timeline. In fact, if you've ever watched any Doctor Who at all, it's likely you've seen a flux point. Once you've singled out all of the fixed points that can never change and the causal nexuses that shouldn't be interfered with, flux points are what's left. The moments where you can make a difference without affecting the entire future. Think of it like this. If you wanted to drive from one side of the country to the other and be able to see all of the biggest cities and attractions, there are places you wouldn't be able to skip. Washington, D.C., New York City, and Hollywood are all mandatory for this kind of trip. But once you've plotted out all the big points, you have thousands of possible routes you can take to get from one to the next. Detours, back roads, smaller attractions, and cities that you can change as you drive from one big spot to the next. Those are the flux points. While the entirety of Bowie Base 1 had to die to get humanity to explore the stars, the steps taken to get us to Mars and what we do afterwards are all up to us. And that's why the Doctor chooses these moments to explore. These are the moments that you can really help people. Because while it might not change all of humanity to answer some distant distress call from a distant space station, it saves lives. It makes a difference. I don't think it can be said better than how the 5th Doctor said it. Only the broad strokes have been laid down. It's in the moments between the ticks of the clock where life truly thrives, where we can make a difference. We live in flux points. While the pillars of time might have already been laid down long beforehand, and the causal nexuses are constantly shifting the direction of the timeline, we live in the real moments of importance. The moments where we can make a difference to the world around us. The moments where we can change people's lives, even if we can't change the timeline of the universe. And these are the best moments of them all. So live between the ticks of the clock, because while the broad strokes might already be laid down, every decision we make still makes a difference. This is Singularity, and remember to stay curious. Hey guys, thanks for checking out this video on the timeline in Doctor Who. This took me a lot longer to get out than I wanted it to. I've been on vacation for about 2 weeks and I got almost no work done in that time period. So it's been a solid 3 weeks, factoring in the time that it took to edit it as well. At least 3 weeks since my last video. If you're new to the channel, I don't normally take this long. I try to get them out every 2 weeks if possible. But thanks for checking it out nonetheless. I'm going to try to get the next video out within a week to make up for this one taking so long. And that one's going to be about the Incredible Hulk and Bruce Banner and what's going on with the psychology in that situation. So tune in for that one. Subscribe if you like this video and comment letting me know what you thought. I'll see you next time. Bye.